Clash Royale officially has a brand new meta, and with the global tournament starting in just a few days, let's go ahead and go over the best decks to use in September of 2021. Hey guys, Legendaray here, and welcome back to another Clash Royale video. Today, we're going over the top 5 decks to use in this current Clash Royale meta. For each deck, I'm going to be going over a quick synopsis of how to play each deck effectively. But before we get into the video, if you could please leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. Also, use code Legendaray in the shop. You get the dealio. Let's get right into the decks. Number 1, Mega Knight Ram Rider. Mega Knight Ram Rider is a deck that has been just in the meta for a very long time, but in this recent meta, with Royal Hogs becoming increasingly popular in this current meta, the Mega Knight serves as a very useful way to deal with those annoying piggies. Starting off, this deck is a combination between a control and a bridge spam deck, meaning that you're going to be utilizing aspects from both of those archetypes. Starting off the match, I'm generally going to be a little bit more passive. I play very reactively with these control type decks, figuring out what the opponent has first and then formulating a game plan on how I will break through on offense. So on the defensive end, let's take a look at the tools that we have. Mega Knight is there to take care of those Royal Hogs, but of course you won't have the Mega Knight in cycle every time, so the E-Wiz and the Bandit will generally be what you'll be using most of the time, in combination with the Snowball, which with its increased pushback is actually very useful. In addition, Ram Rider and Inferno Dragon will be your two main ways to deal with air units, as the Ram Rider has that very useful snare ability, and the Inferno Dragon can just take care of any big tank that the opponent has. Moving on to the offense, the deck is very counter push based, meaning that oftentimes you'll use the surviving units to build up pushes after a defense, but this deck does have two cheap cards that you can play at the bridge just as quick pressure, namely the Bandit and the Barbarian Barrel. Of course, the Ram Rider can be played at the bridge for quick pressure as well, but that's generally going to be a little bit more niche, as the Ram Rider being 5 elixir is actually surprisingly easy to stop when she's on her own. All in all, a faster, aggressive control deck, very effective in this current meta. Number 2, Royal Hogs Cycle. Royal Hogs, like I said, is all the rage in this new meta. Because the Royal Hogs have almost an instant first attack time, as soon as a single hog reaches the tower, they will get guaranteed damage. And with a 6% damage buff, these hogs just got even more effective. Now this is a Royal Hogs cycle deck, meaning that you are trying to keep high pressure all of the time onto your opponents. Starting off the match, cycle some of your cheap cards, cycle a log to get chip damage onto the tower, and maybe just split your Royal Hogs at the bridge. During most of your matches, you're going to be chipping away at your opponent's tower slowly but surely with those Royal Hogs and with your spells, mainly the Earthquake. And to be honest, in terms of the offense of this deck, that's really it. You're just cycling the Earthquakes, the Royal Hogs, and the log on offense as quickly as possible, getting chip damage over and over again until you chip the opponent's tower down. And also, you know, if the opponent makes a big commitment in the back, well then just play your Royal Hogs all in the same lane and pressure the opposite lane accordingly. On the defensive end, well, the first line of defense is a good offense. By pressuring the opposite lane, you won't be able to force your opponents to spend elixir, so they won't be able to support their own offensive pushes. But, you know, sometimes you'll have to just defend a full-on big, gigantic push. And if that is the case, there are a couple things to pay attention to. First off, you want to cycle multiple hunters, especially in double and triple elixir time. So play the hunter first, and the quick cycle of this deck will allow you to cycle to a second one. Secondly, you want to use your cycle cards, such as the log, the royal delivery, and the electro spirit, to stall the opponent's push, to allow your towers and your hunter and your bomber to get as much value as possible. So that's really it. The deck is very simple. The defensive and offensive options are very clear. So just keep in mind that the deck is very aggressive, and you're going to be adopting a chip style of play to take your opponent's tower. Number 3, Goblin Giant Sparky. Goblin Giant Sparky is another deck that has been in the meta for the longest time, but actually in this meta, it's becoming slightly more popular, namely because the poison is becoming a slightly more popular spell in this current meta, so players don't have an immediate way to kill cards such as the Mother Witch and the Sparky. This is a bit of a cheaper beatdown style deck, so starting off the match, you're going to be playing a slow, reactive start. Maybe you can cycle something such as a Rage or a Zap, but aside from that, I'm really not going to want to waste some of my support cards. Instead, I'm mostly going to just be reacting and defending my opponent's pushes. On the defensive end, of course, you have lots of ways to deal with tanks in the Sparky, the mini P.E.K.K.A, and the Mega Minion. Dark Prince is your cheaper way to deal splash damage, and in terms of air defense, you actually have 3 options: the Mega Minion, the Mother Witch, and the Goblin Giant. The Goblin Giant is honestly a bit of an underrated defensive tool because not only can it tank for your other defensive units, but it has those 2 goblins that can actually deal a good amount of damage as well. Moving on to the offense though, this deck is a bit more of an aggressive beatdown deck, and because the Goblin Giant is on the cheaper end of big tanks, if you have a good surviving counter push, you can oftentimes just shove a Goblin Giant in front of your counter push, rage everything up, and the opponents will have an insanely difficult time to stop it. Alternatively, you can also decide to build up a push from the back. If you decide to do this, I would recommend playing some of your slower units first, such as your Sparky and the Mother Witch, which will allow your push to build up a little bit more slowly since the Goblin Giant himself actually travels way too quickly. Again, never underestimate how effective the rage spell can be. It can oftentimes catch your opponents off guard and they simply will not have the ability to react in time to defend the rage. Number 4, Lava Hound Control. Now, Lava Hound has just always been in this meta. You know, there are rarely any top 5 decks videos where Lava Hound isn't on the list, but finally, for once, we have a slightly newer variation of Lava Hound. Actually, it's just an old variation that kind of became more popular again. But anyways, it has a lot of elements of control in a sense that you're forming positive elixir traits on defense and turning that into an offensive push. But because it's also a Lava Hound deck, there is also a heavy beatdown aspect as well. Starting out the match, I generally, again, will be a little bit more passive. Maybe I'll cycle something such as a Goblin Cage or a Miner onto the tower. But aside from that, really not all that much. Just going to be reacting to what my opponents play. If they play one of their air counters or if they make a slightly bigger commitment, honestly, playing a Lava Hound in the back is not that bad of an idea. Unfortunately, we are in a meta where playing Lava Hounds in the back at the very beginning of the match cannot honestly get you punished all that badly. In terms of building up a Lava Hound push, well, it all depends on what your opponents actually have to counter the Lava Hound. If they have a ranged unit, such as a Musketeer or a Hunter, send in the Miner to take that unit out of the way. Or if they have a bigger tank, consider sending in your Inferno Dragon to take that tank out of the way. Your spells are also very, very useful. Oftentimes, I find that I use the spells in conjunction with the Miner to take out my opponent's defenses, but it can also just wear down on the opponent's squishy units as well. On the defensive end, well, you have 3 main powerhouses. You have the Goblin Cage, which can pull any sort of building targeting units. You have the 2 Dragons, which take care of both splash as well as high output damage. And you have the Guards as well as the Miner for some emergency tankage that may be necessary. All in all, even though it is a control and a beatdown deck combined, it's still going to be one of the more aggressive decks that I'm sharing today. So again, just keep that in mind if you do decide to pick this deck up. Number 5, P.E.K.K.A Bridge Spam. P.E.K.K.A Bridge Spam is the classic deck. A lot of you guys have this deck at a very high level. You might even use it on ladder. And good news, this deck is officially back with the buff of the poison, as well as a couple other shifts in this meta. This P.E.K.K.A deck is actually doing insanely well. Starting off, this is going to be a bit more of an aggressive bridge spam type of control deck. So starting off, I will be able to cycle something cheap, ideally the Bandit or the Royal Ghost at the bridge. After that, then I'm going to shift a little bit more onto defensive mode, reacting to what my opponents play. On the defensive end, P.E.K.K.A is there as your big main tank dealer, but because it is a 7 elixir card, especially in single elixir, but just in general, you're not going to want to really rely on the P.E.K.K.A unless you're facing something such as a Golem or some other heavy beatdown deck. Instead, you're going to want to rely on your other defensive units. Magic Archer and Ewiz are your 2 air defense and range damage dealers. You're going to want to play those far apart from the rest of your units to avoid giving your opponent spell value. Royal Ghost is going to be your main splash control, and then with the Bandit, utilizing the Bandit's charge is insanely useful at getting yourself some insane positive elixir trades. On the offensive end of this deck, there will as usual be 2 main ways. The first is just off of a counter push. A Bandit, Royal Ghost, and Battle Ram all cost 4 elixir and less. You'll very likely have elixir to play those in front of your surviving counter push units. Alternatively, you can build up a push from the back. This is what you'll do mostly against cheaper decks. playing a P.E.K.K.A in the back, building up a more beatdown style deck, and maybe even applying double lane pressure with a big P.E.K.K.A push down one lane and a fast bridge spam push down the other. Finally, the Magic Archer. Very useful card. If you know how to use the angles correctly, can oftentimes swindle you match after match after match. And there we go, the top 5 decks to use in this current Clash Royale meta. I'm really enjoying the different decks that I'm beginning to face when I play in the arena. So best of luck in the global tournament, and I'll see you guys next time.